Hello, my name is William James. Welcome to this episode of The Board Book Geek from my Dungeon of Doom. How are all of you? Before we get going, please like, subscribe and share, and hello to all the new people. And I have a podcast called The Viking Writer. Links in the thingy. So, hi! Let's talk about writing cliches. Writing cliches can be done both amazingly and brilliantly and horribly. There are certain tropes and things that we come to expect, and these tropes annoy me to the point that I respect when they're done well, but 9 times out of 10 they're done horribly. So let's talk about them. So first things first, this is more of a fantasy thing, but I think these are more fantasy things full stop, but they cross over into other genres, but I want to talk about it. So let's go. One thing that this bugs me is the Chosen One narrative. I get it. Like, the Chosen One can be done very well and it serves its purpose. But sometimes I'm like, no. I'm kind of sick of the Mary Sue, Gary Sue, Chosen One, Saviour thing, partly because it gets very old very fast. This tends to be more of a YA fantasy thing than an adult fantasy thing, thank God, but it's definitely within adult fantasy and other genres as well, including science fiction. I don't know why it exists. I get why it exists, but sometimes it's annoying. And my eyes are itching because I have hay fever. I'm in my Dr. Evil chair, by the way. It creates a great effect. It vibrates. The I'm not like other girls trope is very annoying. The I'm so pretty, but I don't think I'm pretty. And that, she tells you what she looks like when she looks in the mirror. This is, again, a more YA fantasy thing, but I'm kind of over that. Because I'm so special, but I don't know I'm so special, and I'm so pretty, but I don't know it's just really annoying. More often than not, it's wish fulfillment by a certain group of writers, which really irritates me. And usually their own insecurities projected onto the characters they're writing. So, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's just psychology. Then, this is, I apologise. The magical MacGuffin. This is a thing that irritates me more than anything in writing. They just happen to find an item which fixes all the problems that just happens to be there, or they've had it all along without realising. I.e. the rings from the Vampire Diaries. They just happen to be a MacGuffin. They can serve a purpose, but usually writers just tack them in when they write themselves into a hole. They just happen to find a magical book or a magical key or a staff or a sword or magical dead person. Yes, that's happened. It's a MacGuffin to write themselves out of a hole, and it's their get out clause. I mean, as much as I love Tolkien, he wrote himself into a hole, and then eagles. Talking eagles. Happened. Yes. The film didn't include the talking eagles. They included the eagles, they just weren't talking. It can be annoying. Badly written sex scenes that are like an instruction manual. I have no problems with sex. Sex in literature is not a thing that bugs me. It never has done. But research them. A sex scene shouldn't read like a instruction manual. And it really annoys me when they do this, because it's like, it's not an instruction manual for a car. It doesn't need to be that. Also, long, intimate descriptions of food, of clothes. I get where they are, but, you can do that once or twice. But when it's like every meal, it gets really old. I can't think which book it was, and I did breeze over it, but there was like a 5-page description of the meal. And I get that this meal was important, but I didn't need to know everything they were eating. I wanted the story to move forward. And I think writers, especially writers that necessarily need... I think it's an editor thing rather than a writer thing, because a friend of mine is editing something for me, and they're going through it, and they're talking about it, and they're like, you don't... And I'm guilty of these, by the way, I would like to say. And it gets old, and I'm very aware of them. And then you end up with, again, writers writing themselves into a hole they can't get out of. Endless points of view shift. This is a trope that really irritates me, especially when all the characters basically sound the same. If you're going to do points of view shift, make sure each character is distinct and has a different voice. There's many books that are guilty of this. And I also think the urban fantasy cliche, just this one is always bugs me. The magical world that mortals just don't happen to see, that's right under their nose. And I get again why it exists, because it's easy, because it explains the universe a bit better, but sometimes it can be done so badly or fanficky that it just ends up kind of killing the fun. I mean, I've done videos on writing cliches before, and I always say that you can do them well, but you can do them badly as well, and 9 times out of 10 they're done badly. I think if you're gonna do it, look at the cliche, look at how other people have written it, and then take it apart. Start exercising it, kind of flip the narrative. Don't just make it that I'm not like other girls, or I'm not this, or I'm not that, or I'm not this person. It gets frustrating and it gets really old really fast. I also think when it comes to writing, if you're going to use cliches within story structure, especially within fantasy, that these cliches do exist for a reason, but again, it's how they're done. I firmly admit there are books that are not perfect, that they're not high literature, but they're done. I mean, the revenge plot. And I like a revenge plot, I really do. But sometimes when revenge is the character's only motivation, even after they've technically got revenge, it's kind of like, why are you here? Why are you doing this? Why? It doesn't make sense. Like, I think a writer that used it right was Mia in Nevernight. He used the revenge story. Another thing that annoys me, and this is just a ranty rant now, is aging of characters. For example, what's the name of that god-awful book that I hated? What, YA fantasy. Anyway, the characters all read like they were in their late 20s, 30s, even 40s, their life experiences, their things they've done, this, that. There was a lot more to them, but the characters were all aged like 17, and I feel like the writer had started with them much older and just aged them down to get into the YA market. Just because your characters are teenagers doesn't mean it's YA, and I wish readers would realise that. But also, it just felt so tacked on and awful because none of the characters felt believable. This badass mercenary who has all this history and hatred and kills under their belt, and they're just a soppy teenage girl. Like, she's 17, and a few years ago she was living in Daddy's palace. There's no history there, it just seems tacked on. It's like, how did all this happen between 15 and 17? These books were awful, though, and drove me insane. I can't even... My brain has drawn a blank on their titles, but probably if I mention their titles, someone will hate me for it, so... But yeah, get the ages right. Get the age right to the experience of the character. Don't just drop them in and say, well, this character's 17, 18, 19, but actually have no comprehension of stuff. Also, writers apologising for elements that people find problematic. On Twitter, like, book Twitter is a cesspit, and people go, there was someone uncomfortable with the fact a 19-year-old was dating a 26-year-old in a book. Like, really? And the writer was like, I'm sorry you feel that way, but you should never apologise to these people. You should stand by it. And that really annoys me. Just because one reader finds an element problematic doesn't mean it is. Just because you find it offensive or it upsets you doesn't mean other people will. And I think that's the whole sort of Generation Wuss thing going on, where validate my feelings. But anyway... But yeah, they're just tropes and writing stuff that I don't like, that I try to avoid, or if I do use them, I try and flip on their narrative. Tell me what you think in the comments below, and as always, I will talk to you guys later. Bye.